What's going on, world? It's your boy Gemini Brown here, back with another episode of Nalo Kicking Knowledge. Today, by special request, we will be covering Saturn in the fifth house and what happens when Saturn comes into your natal chart, right? Well, what is Saturn? Saturn is restriction, limitations, reality, discipline, organization, adulthood. It represents older people, all right? And the fifth house is one of my favorite houses. It's like the fun house. Think of the fifth house as your playroom, all right? Where you go and whatever talent you have, that is where your comes alive in your fifth house. So if you're tall, your fifth house is gonna open up activities for you to use your height. If you're creative in the sense of poetry, acting, fifth house relates to all forms of creative self-expression, but more importantly, the stage. So a lot of actors, politicians, all right, are seen from the fifth house. Most importantly, the fifth house, though, is the house of children, and it can show the relationship with our children, how many children we should expect, so on and so forth. So what happens, man? When Saturn comes in here, the first thing you need to know that when Saturn comes into your fifth house, you are serious about your relationships. Fifth house, the house of romance, all right? It shows, how we are with the opposite sex. And the person, of course, we're going to need to see what sign Saturn is in, but for the most part, these are loyal people in their relationships. When they get into a relationship, everyone gets cut off, and all other potential suitors get cut off, and person is focused on whoever they're with. Okay, so with this serious attitude, and it's the thing about Saturn is that it gets better with time. So at first, the restrictions on your fifth house are going to be like, oh my God, why can't I find what I want? Okay, so everyone's going to have a different experience. Of course, if you have Saturn in Libra, your relationships aren't going to be that restricted. Actually, when you get a good position of Saturn there, you don't go through what other people go through. So, all right, I'll put it like this. If you have Saturn in Capricorn, Aquarius, or Libra, you're going to, let's just say it's just those planets there and the aspects are well. Okay, let's say it's sextiling, it's making trines. Good. You're really going to get what you want in relationships. Now, the key here is that the timing. All right. So the next thing about Saturn in the fifth, you're really not meant to be married before that first Saturn return. Saturn wants you to cultivate the other things in the fifth house before you march on to that seventh house and tie things up. So check it out. I'm gonna give you two examples of the Saturn's effect on your romance here. All right. The first one is the late bloomer. Saturn in the fifth can make someone who blooms late as far as relationships, romance, and things like that. These are the people who they're probably going on to become doctors, lawyers, very time consuming careers. All right. People with Saturn in the fifth. And what that does is these people, they see that, okay, I'm pretty serious. Like I'm not one to play the field. So until I really find what I want out of a relationship or the serious tone of the relationship I want it to take, I'm just going to focus on developing my talents. Okay. So what happens is this particular type of Saturn in the fifth person goes to school, gets their degree, becomes highly independent, and they are very much the Saturn person. Okay, so they may meet someone who is not very Saturn-like, but they'll approach the relationship with the seriousness, the discipline, and all of that. But career-wise, they will be very grounded, and it's A material foundation is very much needed for a successful relationship. And by no means is the relationship supposed to be all about um, the material side, but Saturn in relationship shows you reality. All right, reality. So the other planets are adding to that attraction, but Saturn helps sustain your relationships. All right, so like I said, that's one type of Saturn in the fifth person. The next type of Saturn, no, there's actually more than two I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you another one. The next type of Saturn in the fifth person, and I often, through the readings I've done, I've seen this one the most, right? Saturn in the fifth doesn't mean necessarily you have no action in your romantic life. It can very well, depending on like a Gemini, a Saturn in Gemini, a Saturn in Leo, you can very much be not disciplined and not organized, right? And all about the fifth house. So, in order for Saturn to teach you your lesson, he drops the baby bomb on you. Boom. I'm having a kid. So, the next type of Saturn in the fifth person, their kid forces them to grow up. All right? So, I like to look at this particular type of person as the lifer, someone who is just out here enjoying lack of responsibility and kind of ignoring Saturn, but then Saturn says, I'm all right, this is how you're gonna learn your lesson. And they give you a kid. And once that kid comes, the person undergoes a very, very serious transformation. And this is, of course, with Scorpio being the sign of transformation, for someone with Saturn in the fifth in Scorpio, they're the perfect example. You will have this person literally goes from partying all the time, carefree, to nope, I'm a mom, I'm a dad, it's all about my kid. Sorry. It really forces them to grow up. So I always tell people, you have to look at the good. You have to look at the good of what Saturn could do, right? And then with these same people, what happens is that kid helps them find themselves. All right, it lets them know, like, all right, I need to buckle down. I need to have this sense of direction. And they start working with their Saturn even more. All right. Third type of person with Saturn in the fifth. This is the person. This is the person that's just not like anyone their age. They're like, these people are too immature. I need someone more on my level. So you have a person who's just always felt more mature, and they're attracted to other people. Now, this attraction does not always have to be romantic. Saturn in fifth can also show someone who is mentored by older people, or really just gets along with older people than they do people of their age, because of that natural maturity. And what happens from there is that what I've noticed is that these people are more prone to come into a good situation as far as their talent. So maybe if they were lacking direction, they meet some type of mentor that shows them the direction that they should take. Another way of looking at this is that a lot of second generation politicians or actors also have Saturn in the fifth, where it shows that. So say, I know an actress whose father is an actor, and she has her sun and her Saturn conjunct, and what it does is basically show that father was that mentor for her, and he made her, quite serious about the craft of acting and things like that. So these are great ways to look at Saturn in the fifth. One thing I would definitely add to it is that at the same time, with Saturn being restrictions, now please guys do not get alarmed, all right? But it's possible that someone with Saturn in the fifth, maybe it's not aspected well, cannot have kids. Okay, kids won't be something that's in your life plans. And in this sense, I would definitely, if you feel like you're a person who's been trying to have a child and it's not working out for you, look at your North Node, look at your Jupiter. Jupiter is a karka of children. um your North Node shows the real path that you're supposed to take, and a lot of people don't realize that path doesn't involve the traditional stuff. All right, so like I said, you may end up either having kids really late in life, or you may not have kids at all. All right, the next part of Saturn in the fifth is that key along with the children. Um, your kid may be born disabled. Something may be wrong with them in some type of way. It can all vary. All right. So the planets in your fifth house are going to tell you about your children, the qualities in them. All right. So on the same flip side, if your kid is all right and healthy, they may just be very Saturn like in nature. Okay. And like I said, you may teach that to them, or that may represent the type of relationship you guys have.